The throne room of Krinth Prime stretched for nearly a kilometer, its crystalline walls reflecting the light of 3 suns. Emperor Valtris stood at the center, his forearms raised high above his head. Around him, representatives from 200 conquered species waited in silence. This was the moment they had all been summoned for. "Today marks the beginning of our greatest conquest," Valtris announced, his voice amplified across the vast chamber. "The primitive world called Earth will fall within 6 of their months. Their species will serve us, and their planet will feed our empire." The assembled aliens erupted in celebration. Valtris had ruled for 400 years and conquered 67 civilizations. He had never failed. The humans would be no different. Commander Zeltis stood among the military leaders, already reviewing the invasion plans in his mind. He had led 200 successful campaigns. Earth would be simple. Their scans showed the humans had barely explored their own solar system. They had no shields, no plasma weapons, and no unified planetary government. It would be easier than most conquests. The Emperor continued his speech describing the glory that awaited them. The Krinthian fleet would demonstrate the Empire's power once again. Subject species across the galaxy would see what happened to those who existed outside the Empire's reach. While Valtris spoke, the declaration of war was already being transmitted across space. It would reach Earth in a matter of hours, traveling on quantum channels that the Krinthians believed only they could access. Jake Morrison sat in his chair at monitoring station Delta 7 in Nevada, halfway through a bag of chips. The station was old, built 60 years ago when people still worried about alien signals. Now it mostly picked up interference from satellites and the occasional radio telescope malfunction. His computer beeped. Jake glanced at the screen and saw a new signal had been logged. The translation software was already working on it, which was weird. The translation program rarely activated. It was probably another glitch. He clicked on the file. The translation appeared on his screen, full of words like conquest and total war and submit or perish. Jake read through it twice, then checked the source data. The signal had come from outside the solar system, which was interesting, but the whole thing read like a bad science fiction movie script. Jake created a new incident report, typed Incident 2247-0834, possible hoax transmission or translation error, and filed it in the database. He made a mental note to mention it to his supervisor during their weekly meeting. Then he went back to watching videos on his phone. 3 hours later, Linda Hayes arrived for her shift. She was Jake's supervisor, a woman in her 50s who had worked at the station for 23 years. She had seen countless false alarms, equipment failures, and misidentified signals. She knew how to tell the difference between real anomalies and technical problems. During her lunch break, Linda scrolled through the incident reports from Jake's shift. She opened the file for Incident 2247-0834 and read the translated message. Her first thought was that someone was playing a prank using a deep space transmitter. Her second thought was that the translation software needed an update because this was obviously garbage. She marked the incident as probable hoax, low priority, and moved on to the next report. There were 17 other items that needed her attention, including a malfunctioning antenna and a scheduling conflict for next month's maintenance. Far above Earth's atmosphere, the Krinthian armada was already moving. 1,200 warships had departed from staging bases across the Empire. They carried 40 million soldiers, enough to occupy every major city on Earth. The year. Fleet's logistics officers had calculated that they would need 6 months to fully process and integrate Earth's population into the Empire's labor system. The ships traveled through a method the Krinthians called dimensional folding. It was slower than some other species' technology, but it was reliable. The fleet would arrive at Earth in 90 standard days. Commander Zeltis stood on the bridge of his flagship, studying holographic projections of Earth. The planet was beautiful, covered in blue oceans and green continents. It would be a valuable addition to the Empire. The humans had already done much of the work, building cities and infrastructure that could be repurposed. "Sir, should we prepare the occupation protocols?" his second officer asked. "Yes," Zeltis replied. "Standard procedure. Identify their military installations, communication centers, and government buildings. We will demonstrate our superiority with a single orbital strike, then demand surrender. If they resist, we proceed with full invasion." The officer nodded and moved to relay the orders. Zeltis felt confident. In all his years of military service, he had learned that primitive species always followed the same pattern. They would see the Corinthian fleet, realize they were outmatched, and surrender. A few might resist, but they would be quickly eliminated. Within a month, Earth would be processing resources for the Empire. Back on Earth, life continued as it always had. In Houston, construction worker Peter Grant was helping build a new shopping mall. The foundation had been poured last week, and now they were starting on the steel framework. Peter looked forward to finishing this job. His daughter's birthday was coming up, and he wanted to take a few days off. In Iowa, Dr. Lisa Barnes was analyzing soil samples from experimental farming plots. Her research focused on increasing crop yields using new genetic modifications. The work was boring but important. Feeding 8 billion people required constant innovation. In California, politician Gregory Stone was preparing for a debate. He was running for re-election to the state Senate, and the polls showed he was trailing his opponent by 3 points. He needed to make a strong impression tonight. None of them had any idea that 1,200 alien warships were heading toward Earth. None of them knew that an empire spanning 800 star systems had marked humanity for conquest. The declaration of war sat in a database in Nevada, marked as low priority, waiting for someone to care. Jake Morrison left work that evening thinking about what to have for dinner. He had completely forgotten about the strange transmission. It seemed unimportant compared to his actual problems, like the fact that his car was making a weird noise and probably needed new brakes. The Corinthian fleet continued its journey through the darkness of space, getting closer to Earth with each passing hour. In 87 days, they would arrive. In 87 days, the war would begin, but Earth would have to notice first. The Corinthian fleet emerged at the edge of Earth's solar system exactly 90 days after departure. Commander Zeltis watched as his ships dropped out of dimensional fold space, appearing near the orbit of Neptune. Everything had gone according to plan. Deploy reconnaissance drones, Zeltis ordered. Map their defensive installations and identify high-value targets. We attack in 48 hours. 300 drones launched from the fleet speeding toward the inner solar system. They would scan Earth and its surrounding space, providing detailed intelligence for the invasion. The Corinthians had done this hundreds of times before. It was routine. The drones reached Earth's orbital space and immediately encountered a problem. There were objects everywhere. Thousands upon thousands of satellites, dead rocket stages, broken equipment, and debris filled the space around the planet. The drone's sensors struggled to distinguish between active threats and abandoned junk. "Sir, we're detecting over 50,000 objects in near-Earth orbit," a sensor officer reported. "Most appear to be debris, but some are clearly functional." Zeltis frowned. "Why would they leave so much wreckage in orbit? Are they using it as a defensive barrier?" "Unknown, sir. The debris field is extremely dense and appears to be unmanaged. Some pieces are traveling at velocities that would be lethal to our ships." Before Zeltis could respond, alarms blared across the bridge. One of the reconnaissance drones had been destroyed. Collision with a defunct communications satellite traveling at 8 kilometers per second. The impact had vaporized both objects instantly. "Pull the drones back to safe distance," Zeltis ordered. "This orbital field is more dangerous than anticipated. They've weaponized their own debris." Another drone reported damage from a collision with a 50-year-old rocket stage. A third had to make an emergency course correction to avoid a cluster of dead satellites. The Corinthians had never encountered anything like this. Most civilizations cleaned their orbital spaces. Leaving debris was inefficient and dangerous. On Earth, NASA technician Claire Foster was having a frustrating day. The orbital monitoring system kept showing anomalies, and 3 of her tracking satellites had gone offline. She assumed it was another equipment malfunction. The detection grid was 40 years old and constantly breaking down. She filed a maintenance request with the engineering department and checked her watch. Her daughter had a soccer game in 2 hours, and Claire had promised to be there. The satellite problems could wait until tomorrow. At the Lunar Traffic Control Station, operator Danny Phillips was dealing with his own headaches. The radar systems were showing strange contacts near Jupiter. The signals appeared and disappeared randomly, and the tracking software couldn't get a solid lock. Danny had seen this before when the new Chinese lunar base had activated their experimental communications array. The system had interfered with traffic control for a week before they fixed it. He sent an annoyed message to the International Space Authority, complaining about unauthorized transmissions. Commander Zeltis studied the reconnaissance data with growing confusion. The humans had created an incredibly sophisticated defensive network without even trying. Every piece of orbital debris was a potential weapon. Any ship entering close orbit would be bombarded by thousands of high-velocity impacts. "We need to revise our strategy," he told his officers. "Prepare for long-range bombardment. We'll destroy their infrastructure from maximum distance, then clear the orbital field before landing ground forces." The Corinthian fleet moved into position. Targeting computers identified what appeared to be military installations based on power consumption and communication patterns. The first wave of strikes would demonstrate the Empire's superiority and force a quick surrender. Energy weapons charged. Missiles locked onto targets. Zeltis gave the order to fire. On Earth, an abandoned factory in Detroit exploded. The building had been scheduled for demolition anyway, so nobody investigated beyond filing an insurance claim. A data center in Iceland melted into slag, destroying several $1 million worth of cryptocurrency mining equipment. The owners blamed a power surge. An empty warehouse in Nevada collapsed into rubble. The structure had been condemned 6 months earlier for safety violations. Local news stations reported on the incidents but attributed them to various mundane causes. Gas leaks, electrical fires, structural failures. Nobody connected them as part of a pattern. Strange explosions happened sometimes. That was just life. Insurance investigator Helen Price reviewed the claims from the Detroit factory. The explosion seemed suspicious. The building's owner had taken out a large policy just 2 months before the incident. She made a note to investigate possible fraud and moved the file to her pending cases. Conspiracy theorist Randy Cooper posted a video online claiming the explosions were evidence of government weapon testing. He showed shaky footage from Iceland and drew elaborate diagrams connecting various incidents. His viewers enjoyed the content, but most people dismissed him as they always did. Randy had claimed similar things about strange weather patterns, unexplained lights, and unusual seismic activity. He was entertaining but not credible. Then the Corinthians made a mistake. One of their targeting computers identified an orbital manufacturing platform as a military installation. The platform was operated by the Nakamura SpaceX consortium, producing specialized components for satellite construction. 47 workers were aboard when the Corinthian strike hit. The platform exploded silently in the vacuum of space. Emergency beacons activated automatically, but by the time rescue ships arrived, there were no survivors. At the Pentagon, military analyst Karen White was reviewing routine intelligence reports when she saw the orbital platform incident. She pulled up data from the past week and noticed something strange. Several unexplained explosions, all at locations that could be considered infrastructure targets. The Detroit factory had been near a major transportation hub. The Iceland data center was connected to international communications networks. The Nevada warehouse had been storing old military equipment. Karen created a presentation and requested an urgent meeting with General Paul Martinez. Something was wrong, and it was bigger than anyone realized. General Martinez sat in his office reading Karen's report. The pattern was clear once someone bothered to look for it. The explosions weren't accidents. They were attacks. But attacks from whom? "We need to brief the president immediately," Martinez said, "and get our defensive systems online. I don't know who's shooting at us, but we need to be ready to shoot back." Commander Zeltis reviewed the battle reports with satisfaction. The humans hadn't responded to the bombardment, which meant their will to resist was already broken. A few more strikes would force their surrender. Then his sensors detected movement. Earth was launching something into space. Multiple somethings. Hundreds of objects rising from the planet's surface on pillars of fusion fire. "Sir, the humans are deploying defensive satellites," an officer reported. "They're moving fast." Very fast, Zeltis watched the display. The human satellites were accelerating at rates that should have been impossible for such large objects. They moved with precision, spreading into formation around the planet. "Are those military satellites?" he asked. "Unknown, sir, but they're equipped with weapons, and they're positioning themselves between us and Earth." For the first time, Zeltis felt uncertain. The humans hadn't surrendered. They were preparing to fight, and their technology appeared to be much more advanced than the reconnaissance data had suggested. President Elizabeth Crawford sat in the emergency conference room beneath the White House, surrounded by advisors and military leaders. General Paul Martinez stood at the head of the table presenting the evidence that Karen White had compiled. The attack started 8 days ago, Martinez explained. We initially dismissed them as accidents because they seemed random. But they're not random. Someone is targeting our infrastructure from space. Fine, do we know who? The president asked. Not yet. But we've confirmed multiple hostile contacts in near-Earth orbit. Unknown vessels, definitely not human origin. They've been firing on us for over a week. Elizabeth felt her stomach tighten. This was the scenario that every leader dreaded. The one that seemed like science fiction until it wasn't. What's our response capability? We're activating all defensive systems, Martinez said. Ground-based lasers, interceptor satellites, and our aerospace fighter squadrons. We're also recalling the fleet from Mars. How long until we're ready? Most systems are already active. We can engage within the hour, the president nodded. Do it. And find out who they are and what they want. Commander Zeltis watched in horror as Earth's defensive systems came online. The satellites weren't just fast, they were impossibly fast. They moved with the precision of military hardware, but the speed of weapons designed for entirely different purposes. Sir, the satellites are accelerating at 12 G-forces, a sensor operator reported. Our targeting computers can't track them properly. Impossible, Zeltis said. Nothing that size should be able to generate that much thrust. What are they using for propulsion? Unknown, sir. The energy signature is unlike anything in our database. Then the ground-based lasers activated. Brilliant beams of coherent light reached up from Earth's surface, burning through the vacuum of space. The first beam struck a Corinthian cruiser's shield, and the shield collapsed immediately. The second beam cut through the hull like it was made of paper. Shields down on the Valiants, someone shouted. Hull breach on decks 4 through 7. Zeltis stared at the tactical display in disbelief. The humans' laser weapons were far more powerful than they should be. The Corinthians had estimated that Earth's technology was at least 200 years behind the Empires, but these weapons were cutting through military-grade shields like they didn't exist. All ships, evasive maneuvers, he ordered. Return fire and prepare for... His words were cut off as Earth's aerospace fighters launched. They rose from bases across the planet, small dart-shaped craft that accelerated even faster than the satellites. They moved in complex patterns, weaving through space with impossible agility. Fighter pilot Kevin Sanders pulled hard on his control stick, bringing his craft around in a turn that would have crushed a normal human. His flight suit compensated automatically, keeping him conscious despite the 12 G-forces. He had trained for orbital combat his entire career, but he had never expected to use those skills against real enemies. Falcon Squadron, this is Falcon 1, he said over the radio. I have visual on multiple hostile targets. They're big, slow-moving. Lock weapons and engage. The alien ships were enormous compared to his fighter, but they moved like cargo freighters. Kevin's targeting computer locked onto the nearest vessel, and he fired a spread of missiles. The weapons streaked across the gap, striking the alien ship's hull. The alien vessel tried to turn, but it was too slow. Kevin's missiles detonated against what looked like an engine assembly, and the entire back section of the ship exploded in a ball of plasma. Splash 1, Kevin reported. These things can't maneuver for shit. Across the battlefield, other human fighters were experiencing the same thing. The alien ships were large and powerful, but they couldn't match the speed or agility of Earth's military craft. Within 30 minutes, 34 alien vessels had been destroyed or disabled. Commander Zeltis ordered a full retreat. His fleet was being torn apart by an enemy that shouldn't even exist at this level of technology. The humans weren't primitives. They were warriors with weapons that exceeded anything the Corinthian Empire possessed. On the ground, Dr. Lisa Barnes was examining pieces of debris from a destroyed alien vessel that had fallen near her research station in Iowa. Military personnel had asked her to look at it because of her background in materials science. She ran the alien metal through her analysis equipment and frowned at the results. This is weird, she muttered. This alloy is actually less heat-resistant than what we use for spacecraft construction. How did they get here with this stuff? She moved to the next piece, what looked like part of a propulsion system. The design was strange, bulky, and inefficient. Are they using fusion drives? She wondered aloud. We stopped using those 80 years ago because they're too big and slow. Rachel Moore, an engineer from NASA, was looking at the same debris. She had been called in to help analyze the alien technology. Look at this, she said, pointing to a component. This is their power distribution system. It's based on physical conduits, not wireless energy transfer. That's ancient technology. Maybe they're just scouts, Lisa suggested. Maybe their real military uses better equipment. Maybe, Rachel said. But she didn't believe it. Everything about the alien technology suggested that they were using their best equipment, and their best equipment was worse than humanity's standard hardware. The truth was becoming clear to both of them. Humans hadn't developed advanced technology despite their circumstances. They had developed it because of their circumstances. Earth's higher gravity, corrosive atmosphere, and violent weather patterns had forced humanity to create robust, efficient systems. The competition between nations had accelerated innovation at a rate that more peaceful civilizations never achieved. Commander Zeltis sat in his quarters aboard his damaged flagship, composing a message to Emperor Valtris. His hands shook as he wrote the words that would end his military career. The invasion has failed. Earth's military capabilities far exceed our projections. Their technology is superior to ours in multiple critical areas. Their weapons are more powerful, their ships are faster, and their tactical abilities are exceptional. We have lost 34 vessels with minimal damage inflicted on the enemy. I am recommending immediate withdrawal and diplomatic negotiations. He paused, then added one more line. We have made a catastrophic error. They are not primitives. They are the most dangerous species we have ever encountered. On Earth, most people still didn't know there had been a battle. News organizations reported on unusual activity in orbit and military exercises, but few details were released. The government wanted to avoid panic while they figured out what was happening. Jake Morrison saw the news reports and felt a strange sensation in his stomach. He pulled up the old incident report from 3 months ago, the one about the transmission he had dismissed as a hoax. He read it again, carefully this time. The transmission had said something about conquest and total war. It had come from outside the solar system, and now there were alien ships attacking Earth. Oh no, Jake whispered. Oh no, no, no. He had ignored a declaration of war. Emperor Valtris read Commander Zeltis's report 3 times, unable to believe what he was seeing. The invasion had failed. More than that, it had been completely destroyed. The humans had crushed his fleet with minimal effort, losing only a handful of their own ships. Recall all forces, Valtris ordered his council. We will withdraw to the Beta Hydri system and establish a defensive position. Then we will negotiate a peace treaty. His advisors looked uncomfortable. One of them, an elderly counselor named Krithis, spoke carefully. Your Majesty, the other species are watching. If we retreat, they may see it as weakness. We have already shown weakness by losing, Valtris said bitterly. A strategic withdrawal is better than total annihilation. Send the order. But humanity didn't understand Corinthian military protocols. On Earth, military leaders saw the alien fleet retreating and made a simple calculation. An enemy running away meant you should chase them and finish the fight. Admiral Susan Carter stood on the bridge of the UNS Washington, watching the alien vessels flee toward the outer solar system. She had been given command of Earth's response force, a hastily assembled collection of military and civilian vessels. They're retreating, her tactical officer said. Should we pursue? Susan thought for a moment. The aliens had killed 47 people and attacked multiple targets on Earth. They couldn't just be allowed to leave and regroup for another attack. Yes, she said. All ships prepare for pursuit. We're going after them. The Earth fleet consisted of 12 military warships, 47 converted mining vessels with improvised weapons, 23 commercial haulers carrying marines and equipment, and hundreds of autonomous drones. It looked like a disorganized mess, but it was fast and determined. The military ships were purpose-built for combat, with advanced weapons and shields. The mining vessels were tougher than they looked, with industrial-strength hulls and powerful cutting lasers. The commercial haulers were just along for the ride, carrying the troops that would be needed if they captured any alien installations. To the Corinthians, watching this fleet approach on their sensors, it looked like an enormous armada. They couldn't understand why the humans would commit so many resources to a pursuit. In Corinthian culture, retreating forces were allowed to withdraw. It was considered honorable to respect an enemy's surrender, but humans didn't know about that custom. And even if they had known, they might not have cared. The chase continued for 3 weeks, with the human fleet following the Corinthians through deep space. The aliens reached Beta Hydri system and stopped at their staging base, hoping to establish a defensive position. They had 400 warships there, enough to hold off an attack while they negotiated. Admiral Carter brought her fleet out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system and surveyed the alien base. It was a massive orbital structure with hundreds of ships docked around it. This was clearly an important installation. "Send a message," she ordered. "Tell them to surrender or we'll open fire." The Corinthians didn't respond. They were preparing their defenses, expecting a long siege. In their military doctrine, orbital bases could hold out for months against attacking forces. Human military doctrine was different. "They're not answering," the communications officer reported. "Then we attack," Susan said. "All ships weapons free. Target their military vessels first, then the base structure." The battle began badly for the Corinthians. The human military ships opened fire with long-range missiles, forcing the alien vessels to scatter. Then the mining ships moved in, and the Corinthians discovered a terrible new weapon. Captain Nick Barnes commanded a converted mining ship called Second Chance. His vessel had been hauling ore from the asteroid belt before being retrofitted with weapons. The main weapon was still the industrial mining laser, designed to cut through solid rock. Nick targeted a Corinthian cruiser and activated his laser. The beam struck the alien ship's shields, which should have absorbed most of the energy, but the mining laser automatically cycled through different frequencies to cut various types of materials, and one of those frequencies matched a harmonic weakness in the Corinthian shield technology. The shield collapsed instantly. The laser burned through the hull, cutting the alien ship in half. "Holy shit," Nick said, watching the alien vessel split apart. "Did you see that? Their shields can't handle frequency modulation." He immediately broadcast his discovery to the rest of the fleet. Within minutes, dozens of mining ships were targeting alien vessels with their industrial lasers, exploiting the shield weakness that the Corinthians had never known existed. Engineer Rachel Moore was aboard the UNS Washington, serving as a technical advisor. She had been studying the alien technology captured in the first battle, and she had discovered something interesting. The Corinthian reactors used a specific type of plasma containment field that was vulnerable to destabilization. She approached Admiral Carter with an idea. "I can build a weapon that will shut down their reactors," Rachel said. "It's based on a principle I learned in my college physics class. Their containment fields use a resonance pattern that we can disrupt." "How long will it take?" Susan asked. 6 hours. "Maybe less if your engineering team helps." "Do it." Rachel and the Washington's engineers worked through the night, assembling a device from spare parts and modified equipment. By morning, they had created a prototype weapon that could project a destabilization field across a wide area. They tested it on a captured Corinthian ship. The vessel's reactor shut down immediately, leaving it dead in space. "It works," Rachel said, grinning. "We can disable their entire fleet without destroying them." The battle shifted again. Human forces used the destabilization weapon to shut down alien reactors, then boarded the disabled vessels. The Corinthians found themselves fighting human marines in close quarters, and that was another disaster. Humans were stronger than most aliens due to Earth's higher gravity. They were more aggressive, having evolved as predators, and they were relentlessly determined, refusing to give up even when outnumbered. Commander Zeltis watched his fleet collapse. 400 ships disabled or destroyed, thousands of soldiers captured. The staging base itself was taking damage from human weapons that seemed impossibly powerful. He opened a communication channel to the human fleet. "We surrender," he said. "Please stop." "We surrender." Admiral Carter ordered a ceasefire. The human fleet held position while Marines secured the alien base and captured the surviving Corinthians. The battle was over. Across the galaxy, 200 subject species watched the broadcasts in stunned silence. The mighty Corinthian Empire had been defeated by a single-planet civilization. The aliens who had ruled for centuries had been crushed in a matter of weeks. Rebellions began breaking out immediately. Species that had been conquered decades or centuries ago saw their chance for freedom. The Corinthian Empire started to collapse from within. Emperor Valtris received the news in his palace on Corinth Prime. His empire was falling apart. His fleet was destroyed, and the humans were still coming. "Send a message to Earth," he ordered. "Tell them we want peace. Tell them we will give them anything they ask for." On Earth, President Elizabeth Crawford received the alien emperor's message. She read it carefully, then looked at her advisors. "They're surrendering," she said. "The war is over." General Martinez shook his head in disbelief. We mobilized less than 20% of our military, he said. We barely tried. Apparently that was enough, Elizabeth said. She felt relief mixed with confusion. They had won a war that most people on Earth didn't even know was happening. Now comes the hard part, she said. We need to figure out what to do with a collapsing empire. 3 months after the war ended, Ambassador Gregory Stone stepped off the shuttle onto Krinth Prime. He was accompanied by Dr. Lisa Barnes, General Martinez, and translator Sophie Chen. They were the first humans to visit the alien homeworld, and they came as representatives of the victorious side. The palace of Emperor Valtris was enormous, built from crystal that reflected the light of 3 suns. Gregory had seen pictures, but nothing prepared him for the actual scale of the place. It made every human building look tiny by comparison. Remember, Gregory said to his team as they walked through the halls, we're here to make peace, not to gloat. Do they understand that? Martinez asked quietly. We're about to find out. Emperor Valtris waited in a smaller meeting room, not the grand throne chamber where he had declared war. He looked old and tired, his forearms hanging limply at his sides. Around him sat several advisors, all looking equally defeated. Ambassador Stone, Valtris said through a translation device. Thank you for coming. I apologize for the circumstances of our meeting. Gregory nodded respectfully. Your Majesty, we're here to discuss peace terms and the future relationship between our peoples. I will agree to any terms you propose, Valtris said. We cannot continue this war. Your species is too powerful. That's not entirely accurate, Dr. Lisa Barnes said. She had been silent until now, but she felt the need to correct this misunderstanding. We're not more powerful. We're just different. Valtris looked at her with confusion. You destroyed our fleet. You crushed our military forces with ease. How is that not power? Lisa glanced at Gregory, who nodded for her to continue. Your technology is actually very advanced, she explained. In many ways, it's more sophisticated than ours, but it was developed under different conditions. She pulled up a holographic display showing Earth and Krinth Prime side by side. Your planet has lower gravity, a stable climate, and a gentle environment. You developed technology that was efficient and elegant because you could afford to. Earth is harsher. Higher gravity, violent weather, corrosive atmosphere. We had to develop technology that was robust and powerful just to survive. Are you saying we lost because our world is too peaceful? Valtris asked. In a way, yes, Lisa said. And because you built an empire without serious competition. You never needed to innovate at the pace we did. Human nations competed with each other for centuries, driving constant technological advancement. The room fell silent as the aliens absorbed this information. Finally, Valtris spoke again. So we are not weak. We simply evolved differently. Exactly, Lisa said. Gregory took over the conversation, steering it toward practical matters. We don't want to conquer your empire, he said. We want trade, knowledge sharing, and security. We propose the Treaty of Terra. He outlined the terms. No military conflict between Earth and Krinthian territories. Free trade agreements and technology exchange. Human assistance in stabilizing the regions that were breaking away from the Empire. The establishment of a galactic commerce network that would benefit everyone. Valtris listened carefully. These terms were far more generous than he had expected. Why are you being so reasonable, he asked. You could demand tribute, territories, complete submission. Because we don't need those things, Gregory said. We have a whole galaxy to explore. We'd rather have trading partners than conquered subjects. The treaty was signed that day. News spread across the galaxy quickly. Humanity was offering peace and cooperation instead of conquest. It was unprecedented. The 200 species that had been part of the Krinthian Empire reacted in different ways. Some were grateful and immediately sought alliances with Earth. Others were terrified of humanity's military power and tried to stay neutral. A few attempted to play human nations against each other, but that strategy failed quickly. The humans had learned to cooperate when facing external threats. Back on Earth, life had changed rapidly. Orbital infrastructure expanded as new shipyards and stations were built. The first colony ships departed for nearby star systems, carrying volunteers who wanted to explore new worlds. Alien immigrants began arriving, carefully vetted and integrated into human society. Jake Morrison had become a minor celebrity. He wrote a book titled The Message I Ignored That Started a War, and appeared on talk shows discussing his mistake. The book became a bestseller, and Jake made enough money to retire early. He felt guilty about ignoring the declaration of war, but people kept telling him it probably wouldn't have mattered anyway. Peter Grant was now foreman of Earth's largest orbital shipyard, supervising the construction of massive vessels that would carry humans to distant stars. He missed building shopping malls sometimes. The work had been simpler, more straightforward. But he couldn't argue with the salary. He had bought a house for his daughter and put money aside for her education. Dr. Lisa Barnes led a team of 5,000 scientists studying alien technology. Ironically, most of it was less advanced than human equivalents, but it provided valuable insights into different approaches to problem solving. Some alien innovations in energy efficiency and communications were genuinely useful, and humanity was eager to learn. Fighter pilot Kevin Sanders had a new job training alien pilots in human combat techniques. His students were shocked by the aggressive tactics that humans considered normal. They treated Kevin like a master warrior, which he found amusing. He was just a regular pilot doing his job. Rachel Moore started her own company building hybrid technology that combined human and alien designs. Her first product was an improved medical scanner that used human power systems with alien detection algorithms. Within 2 years, she was a billionaire and employed over 10,000 people. Admiral Susan Carter was promoted to commander of the Solar Defense Fleet. She spent most of her time on diplomatic missions now, visiting alien worlds and establishing relationships. It was strange being a military officer who rarely dealt with military matters, but she adapted. Flexibility was a human trait. President Elizabeth Crawford won re-election in a landslide. Her approval ratings had soared after the successful peace treaty. She never expected her legacy to be the president who accidentally won a galactic war, but she accepted it with grace. The galaxy had changed forever. Humanity emerged as a major power, but not through conquest or domination. They earned respect through strength, offered friendship through diplomacy, and shared knowledge freely. It was a new model for galactic civilization. Commander Zelthus, released from captivity after the treaty was signed, requested permission to visit Earth before returning home. He wanted to understand the species that had defeated his empire. He traveled to Nevada and visited monitoring station Delta 7, which had been turned into a museum. The small building where Jake Morrison had first received the declaration of war was now a historical site. Zelthus stood in the modest room, looking at the old equipment and faded furniture. This was where it had all begun, where the Corinthian Empire's greatest military campaign had been received, read, and dismissed as unimportant. Jake Morrison had agreed to give tours of the facility as part of his book promotion. He showed Zelthus around, explaining how the translation software worked and why he had thought the message was a hoax. "We declared total war on you," Zelthus said quietly, standing in front of the computer where the message had first appeared. "And you barely noticed," Jake shrugged. "Yes, sorry about that. We were kind of busy." Zelthus began to laugh, a sound that his species made when confronting something absurd. "Your people won a galactic war by accident. You defeated an empire while building shopping malls and watching entertainment." "To be fair," Jake said, "the shopping mall thing didn't work out." They stood together in silence for a moment, looking at the archived message that had changed the galaxy. Outside, Earth continued as it always had, chaotic, busy, and completely unaware of how extraordinary it really was. Somewhere in deep space, an ancient civilization observed humanity's rise. They were the Watchers, and they had been monitoring the galaxy for 1,000,000 years. They had seen countless species rise and fall, but humanity was different. "The children of chaos have arrived," their leader observed, watching Earth through sensors that could see across dimensions. "They will reshape everything. Should we intervene?" Another asked. "No," the leader said. "Let them grow. Let them explore. The galaxy will never be boring again." But that was a story for another time. On Earth, construction worker Peter Grant looked up at the orbital shipyard he had helped build and smiled. Tomorrow they would start work on humanity's first deep space exploration vessel. It would be named the Friendship, a gesture toward the new era of galactic cooperation. The alien empire had declared total war. Earth had barely noticed, and somehow that had changed everything.